Hey everyone, welcome back to NDC, and today we're going to be talking about list and for each. Whenever you want to show a collection of items in SwiftUI, such as a list of names, tasks, settings, maybe even contacts, you don't need to hardcode every single row. Instead, you can use for each or list, and maybe even a combination of both. These are the foundation for dynamic data in SwiftUI. We can see here, if we're looping through our for each tasks in a VStack, we can see all the items. But if we were to change this to actually be a list instead, we get a different view that's also scrollable. So you can combine them, use one or the other. I'm going to show you how to create these and also style them. So let's go ahead and dive on in. So let's say we have a list of fruit that we want to display to the user. Here I have apple, banana, cherry. We can display this in a VStack. But what if we want to use this list, reference it elsewhere? It's also not ordered, so I can totally just put this in whatever order, and maybe I'm doing this alphabetically and displaying it in the VStack. It kind of works, but it's a little bit messy and hard-coded. Instead, if you do have a list of items, I would suggest using an array. So let's go ahead and create an array of our fruit here. So we'll call this one fruits. Then we can declare it as an array by using the square brackets here. So let's go ahead and make some, of our fruits here. So apples, bananas, etc., right? Let's just add the 3 from before. Now within our VStack, we can just reference the list, but we can't just put, fruits and then call it a day, right? It's going to be like, well, how can I display this array? I'm not really quite sure. That's where for each comes in. So if we type out for each, we can see we do have some autofill options here, but let's talk about it piece by piece. Is we want to say, okay, I want to go through all of these items. So for each is a low level loop. It doesn't create a table for you. It just repeats views over a collection. So your dictionaries, your arrays, right? It works anywhere. So a VStack, ScrollView, and even a ZStack if you really need it to. So within the argument brackets, we need to say, what do I want to loop through? Well, we're going to reference our array of fruits. That's okay. Okay, I'm going to loop through this array. The only thing is, for each needs a way to uniquely identify each element in the data set. So if the data is something simple, like here we have strings or maybe even integers, you can say, and add a comma after the fruits here, whatever the name of your array is, ID, colon, and then we can use the kind of backslash here, dot self with the lowercase self. So this basically means use the value itself as the identity. We're almost done. Outside of the argument brackets, we need to, just like when we're going through a loop, tell it what to go through and how to display it. So here we're going to say fruit, singular, in. For each of those fruit, in that loop that's going through, how do I want this to be displayed? Well, I'm going to use some text here, and I'm going to just pass through the fruits. I don't need those quotation marks. I'm going to display the singular fruit, the fruit in. So fruits is our list. Then we're saying, okay, each one of these items within this list, I'm going to refer to it as fruit, and I want you to display that row by row. And it looks exactly like the VStack, but since we're using that for each, it's so much cleaner. And that's awesome, but there's a little bit more of a better practice to make your data model actually conform to identifiable. Let's say we have a data model of a struct, and this is our task, right? These are different tasks that we want to have the user do. Maybe there's a title, a date it needs to be completed by. You should make it conform to identifiable. Go ahead and add our information here. So why are we making identifiable? Well, if you have a custom data type, like our task structure, SwiftUI needs a stable way to know which item is which when something changes. So if there's an animation, an update, say we're deleting something, etc. So conforming it to identifiable means that your struct has a built-in unique ID. We do have an error here that says it does not conform to the protocol of identifiable because we need to establish an ID. And for that, we can have it equal the UUID with the empty brackets. And that's going to give it the unique universal ID. I'm like 99% sure that's what it stands for. Hold on. Oh, sorry. It's universally unique identifier. There we go. So it's a 128-bit value. So it makes sure that no two UUIDs are essentially ever the same. Then we'd include things like the title. So let title be a string. Let's quickly do an example with that identifiable structure here. So instead, let's do tasks. And we're going to have these be strings because of our title here. There we go. I'm just going to use the autofill to save some time. Now, instead of our fruits, it'd be tasks. We would no longer need this identification because it's being handled by our structure. We then want to say task in, task. Now we would have to include the dot title because of the way our structure is, but we can see that we're able to use that UUID for those identifiable models. This is a really good practice. If you want a little bit of hack, you could actually use string interpolation to grab the ID value of those individual tasks. So if you're ever curious what a UUID looks like, well, there you go. So let's go ahead and next talk about lists. So let's say we just want to display a list with some data. We can pass through those tasks that we've already created here. Just like the for each, we'll do our task in, and then we'll have our text, task dot title. And there we go. We're looping through those different things. And the benefit of displaying them in a list is you get this scrollable view. The downside of doing this is it changes the entire background color. So I'm just going to really quickly, it might be a little bit hard to see, but it does apply this kind of different background. It's very slight different gray. I'll show you how to customize that in just a moment, but it does take up the majority of the view. We can apply a frame to it really quickly. Let's do that. So if we wanted to put a width and a height, right? It might be easier to see that we have this little bit of a difference of gray there. So if you do want to have your list be a certain size, you of course can, and it still has that scrollable property. You can also combine lists with for each, which is the way that I prefer to do it. So we would just do our for each syntax again. So we look through those tasks, task in, so combining these is a really good method. Lists is just the high level version. It's like a built-in table. It adds scrolling, row styling, separators, and importantly, lazy loading built in. So if you do have a ton of different tasks, that lazy loading is going to basically say, I'm not loading and displaying everything until I need to. It'll stay smooth throughout the entire way. But you may also be thinking, why don't I just create a scroll view with for each? Look at that. I can scroll through all my different items. Maybe I can add some custom styling, etc., etc. Well, there's a couple different reasons when to use each of those. Well, the quick rule of thumb is if you need custom UI layouts, for each plus ScrollView. If you do want to scroll, you don't have to. If you need that table-like list with a built-in iOS behaviors, that's where you're going to want to use that list, where it has that built-in table. It's very recognizable. So for each is only scrollable when wrapped in a scroll view. List, it's built in. You can have row backgrounds, fully custom in the for each. For the list, we'll be using the list row background. The list comes with built-in separators, built-in swipe actions. So if you want to have things be deleted on swipe, list has the built-in editing, deleting, moving functions as well. Whereas the for each requires very custom logic. The only real downside to list, in my opinion, is it's very limited to the list table style. So as I mentioned before, you can of course use a frame if you do want to keep it to a certain portion of the view. So maybe the bottom half of your screen has a list, right? And the top half maybe has some displaying. Okay, as I mentioned, it was pretty limiting to customize the list, but I'm going to show you the different ways that you can still customize it. So within the list, and I would do this after, say, your for each or however you're looping through those different items, is we can add the dot list row background. And from here, we can include a color. So if I wanted to do purple, we can add the purple color within the different list row items. However, this doesn't apply to the entirety of the background. If we were to move it out here on the list, you'll notice it actually doesn't show anything. If we want to add the background color, we'll need to add a Z-stack to the entirety of the view here. So let's go ahead and add those braces. Add our background color. We can just do color dot, let's do cyan. And you're like, hey, where is this? It's hidden. I can't see my Z-stack color. What gives? Well, we need to instead apply the dot scroll content background, and we're going to set this to be dot hidden. Now that's going to basically hide that gray, that was really hard to see, background behind the scroll view. Let's also make this ignore safe area so it looks a little bit cleaner. Perfect. And we can still customize that color of the list if we want. So if we want our background to be a certain color, then our list, items to be maybe purple, we can still use that list row background. To further customize, we can look at a few more things. So we can use the list row insets, and this allows us to adjust padding inside those individual rows. So within the argument brackets, you'll want to do edge insets, and I like to do this autofill here. I'll then include the top, leading, bottom, or trailing. There's other options. This I just find to be the easiest. So how much padding do we want? Let's say on the top and bottom, I want 5 to add a little bit more space. And then on the leading and trailing, I'll make it 20. So for each of these rows, it's going to add additional padding. That didn't really change it, but if we were to get a little bit more aggressive with these things, we can see that we can add more padding within these rows, giving you full customization. We already really quickly talked about the list row background, which allows us to add those colors. So if we wanted to have these be purple, so color.purple, maybe some opacity of 0.2. Well, that's pretty unnoticeable. Let's do 0.5. We can also adjust the list row separators, which are always just like dividers, really hard to see. So I like to actually start off by doing the list row separator, the tint. Let's change this to really stand out. Maybe we'll do red. Again, it's like always so difficult to see. Maybe we'll do white. I don't know. Oh, the red actually was standing out pretty good. Let's set that back. If you don't want to see them at all, you can do the list row separator itself, which you can trigger the visibility, and I would do hidden if you don't want to see it. Otherwise, automatic, or you can do visible. And there we go. But the visible, yeah, it sometimes like creates the weird ones on top. So I usually don't mess with it, or I leave it on automatic, which should remove this one from the top there. Let's talk a little bit about the list styles. So we have the .list style that can be applied at the bottom of the list, and we can do the plain list style. Pretty basic, pretty plain, as the name suggests, I suppose. We could then do the grouped style, as well as the inset group style here, which kind of has some more padding around the side, a little bit more of that capsule look to really separate that list from the view, make it stand out, pop out a little bit more. And on watch only, there is also the carousel list style as well. You can also add sections to your list, which are a really great way to add different headers to tell people what portion of the list they're on. It's also a great way to kind of break up the different content. So we can add a section the same way we do for forms. We can add the section keyword, and within the arguments, we can include what content we want to have. I like to add a header and then some text. So from the header, I would then declare my text. And from here, we can say today. Maybe these are things that I need to do today. We'll want to then, outside of the brackets, add our braces and wrap up that different information within those braces. So we can say, okay, today this is what I need to do. And then maybe tomorrow we can add another section. Header, we can add some text that says tomorrow. Add our braces and include that, maybe I'm going to the gym tomorrow. Right? So you can use these sections in order to split that information within your list. It all stays scrollable in one fine list. So maybe if you have different categories of books, things like that, this is a really great way to make sure that you're including everything that you need to and organizing it and displaying those sections. Okay, let's talk about editing and swipe actions. So these allow us to interact with our list. You might see these, especially in user inputted forms. If you went through the Pick a Pal tutorial on the developer website, you're already probably familiar with these. We can add the .swipe actions. And within the argument brackets, we can say, okay, how do I want this swipe to occur? Well, we can set up an edge. And we can use the different, aspect or, kind of screen ratios to say, okay, I want to start at leading or trailing. Leading is set, basically, I want to swipe from left to right, trailing from right to left. Afterwards, we'll want to add our brace. And what do we want to have happen? Well, I want to create a button that shows up that has a role. And for this role, I'm going to set it to be destructive. This is something that is going to be a button where we can use to delete things. After that, you'd add a brace, and here's your delete action. So maybe this is, find the ID of this item, remove it from the list, whatever that action might look like. So now we can swipe, and we can see that this delete pops up. I can kind of grab the item and move it to the side to delete, and we can usually just drag it out fully to remove it. Now, because I don't have any actual, logic here, if I do refresh the view really quickly, it does reappear. So make sure within the braces of the button, you are actually removing the item at that particular element. For the list actions, if you're going to be changing anything, I would put this either in a state private variable or somewhere else that's a little bit more mutatable within your, Xcode project. Otherwise, for our purpose, putting this in a state private variable is great. Then for the onDelete, the way I like to do it is I like to have my ForEach and kind of all wrapped up. So any of the styling, all the information after the argument braces, but still within the list. This is where I'll handle the .onDelete. So you'll remove at the offset, wherever it is within that index to have that swipe to delete. I would then also suggest adding the .onMove. Again, looking at the indices, providing it with a new offset. So we can say from this offset to the new offset, which is going to allow that drag to reorder. You can even include some swipe actions as we had before. I suggest doing the trailing because most people are expecting to delete this way, not delete from left to right, but you can of course customize it. So if you do really want that leading, there you go. For the button roll, for that delete action, if there is any custom logic, definitely include it there. You can also include a label, so you'll see mine has the little trash icon as well. Just adds a little bit more custom flair, and you'll want to have that toolbar of the edit button. Now, the preview is a little bit laggy when it comes to reordering things. So in the simulator here, I have it popped up. Let's say we want to have the workout go to the very top. We can drag and reorder these. So you'll want to select the list item, and there you go. You might also want to include a footnote or somewhere on your list if you do have swipe to delete enabled or the drag to reorder, just to tell the users, as it's not really intuitive unless they're kind of pressing and dragging things around. But I hope that this video helped you learn a little bit more about lists and ForEach, how to use them together, how to use them individually, and what kind of sets the list apart from the scroll view when you might want to use one or the other. But just to go over it one more time, list gives you the instant powerful table data for dynamic data. ForEach is your flexible loop for any container. Together, they're the backbone of dynamic SwiftUI apps. Try combining them with swipe actions, those sections, and identifiable models for maintainable user-friendly apps. I'm going to put this example here in my GitHub pages so you can download it if you would like. Otherwise, dream big, code bigger. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.